Whispers of the Haunted Canvas, story about a cursed painting. In the dimly lit gallery, surrounded by marble busts and ancient relics, a group of scholars gathered before a single painting held in a thick, antique frame. The painting, unlike the others around it, seemed to breathe. Its oil strokes moved like whispers, dragging the eye toward the image of a hauntingly beautiful woman dressed in early 1900s attire. Her eyes followed every observer, piercing through time. "This," began the curator, an old man whose voice was as thin as the air in the room, "is not merely a painting, it's a trap, it's a curse." His audience, drawn from various academic fields, leaned in, eager yet unsettled. He cleared his throat and gestured toward the canvas. "I will tell you the tale of the man who painted this." His name was Lucien Corday, a renowned artist of his time, celebrated for his mastery of light and shadow. But his final work, this one was his undoing. The curator's voice dropped to a whisper, drawing his listeners closer. "They call it Whispers of the Haunted Canvas, and the woman depicted within? Isabelle LaRue, a figure steeped in scandal and mystery, who lived at the turn of the 20th century. Part 1. Lucien Corday and Isabelle LaRue. Lucien Corday was no ordinary artist. By the early 1900s, his works graced the walls of the wealthiest patrons in Paris. He was admired, even revered. But then he met Isabelle LaRue. Isabelle was infamous. Stories surrounded her like a cloud of dark perfume. Stories of secret affairs, whispers of men driven to madness by her charms, and rumors of death. Some claimed she was a witch, others that she was cursed. Regardless, her allure was undeniable, and Lucien fell under her spell. From the moment he met her, he became obsessed. He begged her to let him paint her, and though she was notorious for turning down many artists, something about Lucien's desperation intrigued her. She agreed, on one condition: he had to paint her exactly as she wanted to be remembered. Not as a victim of the rumors, but as a goddess, untouchable and eternal. Over the next few months, Lucien painted feverishly. He ignored friends, family, and even the world outside. In his studio, Isabelle posed for him, her eyes glowing with an intensity that seemed to pull the very life out of Lucien. With every stroke of the brush, Lucien's obsession grew darker. He began to believe that Isabelle wasn't just a woman, she was something otherworldly, something that could not be contained by mere paint. The night Lucien finished the painting, something changed. He stood back to admire his work, but instead of feeling pride, he was filled with dread. Isabelle's eyes in the painting seemed to follow him. Her lips curled in a smile that hadn't been there before. That night, Lucien Corday died. No one knew the cause, but the look on his face when they found him was of sheer terror. Part 2. The curse begins. As the curator spoke, the scholars exchanged uneasy glances, feeling the weight of the story settle over them like a cold fog. After Lucien's death, the curator continued, the painting was sold to a wealthy businessman who admired its eerie beauty. But within days of acquiring it, he too was found dead, the painting hanging eerily on the wall beside him. The painting changed hands several times over the next few decades, each time leaving a trail of unexplained deaths. Some said the woman in the painting whispered to them at night, calling them to her. Others claimed they saw her move, her eyes shifting, her smile widening. The curse, it seemed, was unstoppable. But as with all curses, there was a way to break it. And here, the curator leaned forward, his voice barely above a breath. The only way to escape the curse is to sacrifice someone before the painting. The scholars murmured among themselves, a sense of disbelief creeping into the room. It happened, the curator continued, decades ago. One of the painting's owners, a man desperate to escape its deadly grip, discovered the secret. Legend says he lured a servant into the room where the painting hung and without hesitation killed him. The curse was lifted for a time. "But that's barbaric," one of the scholars interjected. "Barbaric, yes, but the curse doesn't follow the rules of decency." The curator's eyes darkened, and the painting waits. It feeds on obsession, on the dark desires of those who look upon it for too long. Part 3. The Revelation. The scholars stood frozen, the oppressive atmosphere in the room now thick with fear. The painting, glowing faintly under the dim museum lights, seemed to be more alive than before. "Do you see it now?" the curator asked, stepping closer to the painting. Her eyes, the way they follow you. Her smile, how it shifts when you aren't looking. The group turned their gaze toward the painting, some feeling the air grow colder. Isabelle LaRue's face, so serene, so haunting, appeared to breathe with a life of its own. Isabelle LaRue was not a woman, the curator whispered, his voice almost a hiss. She was something far darker. And Lucien, in his madness, bound her soul to this canvas. The scholars gasped, stepping back from the painting as if it might suddenly reach out to them. But there's something else you should know, the curator continued, his eyes glittering. The painting isn't dormant. It feeds on fear, on the energy of those who come too close. The more people know about it, the more it grows in power. A scholar in the back asked in a trembling voice, "Then why? Why show it to us?" The curator smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that brought comfort. "Because you've already seen it, and now the painting knows you. The only question that remains is, who among you will break the curse?" Part 4. The Dark Choice. A heavy silence fell over the room. The scholars exchanged panicked glances, some stepping farther away from the painting, others drawing closer, as if mesmerized. "Surely you're not serious," one of the scholars, a woman with trembling hands, said, her voice cracking. "This is a legend. It can't be real." "Real?" the curator asked. "Look at the painting again." The group hesitated, but as they glanced back, their collective gasp echoed through the gallery. Isabelle LaRue's smile had widened, her eyes glittering with malevolent intent. "It feeds," the curator whispered, "and it is never satisfied." The air grew thick with tension. One of the scholars, a man in his 40s, started edging toward the exit, his steps slow and as if not to draw attention to himself. But the others were rooted in place, torn between disbelief and terror. "You have to understand," the curator said, almost pleading now. "I had no choice but to tell you. The painting, it won't stop until the curse is broken again, and one of you must choose. One of you must end it." The room was silent again. One of the scholars, a tall man with an air of arrogance about him, stepped forward. "This is absurd," he declared, walking up to the painting. "You're trying to scare us with stories." As his hand reached out toward the canvas, a sudden gust of cold air filled the room, and the lights flickered. The painting seemed to darken, its colors deepening, the figure of Isabelle LaRue becoming more pronounced, almost as if she were stepping out of the canvas. The man staggered back, his face pale. He no longer looked skeptical. "Now," the curator said softly, "the choice is yours. But remember, time is running out." As the scholars slowly left the gallery, haunted by what they had seen, one remained behind. He stared at the painting, his mind spinning with the impossible weight of the story he had just heard. The painting's eyes gleamed in the low light, and her smile, always so serene, widened ever so slightly. The curator watched from the shadows, his own fate bound to the cursed canvas. The curse could never truly be broken. It could only be passed on from one soul to another, as long as the painting hung there, waiting for its next victim. And so, whispers of the haunted canvas would remain in the museum, an eternal trap, waiting for the next soul brave or foolish enough to look too closely.